My name is Bob Brocker. I'm the founder and president of AgeWise Colorado. Barbara Boyer is on here, but she is very ill, so she's not going to be on camera. Um, and I'm going to be introducing you to Shauna here in just a moment. But first, I want to share my screen very briefly and give you a little bit more background on who we are and what we do. So, this is probably number 80 something of all the webinars that we've done since we started doing webinars 4 years ago. And we've covered quite a range of topics during that period of time. AgeWise Colorado was created simply because there's identified a need to be able to connect people to services and information and education to help people age well and age wisely in the state of Colorado. And when I say people, I mean there's like 3 million people who are over the age of 40, roughly 40. Um, and we've set that big number because there's so many people who are looking for things to help their older family members, as well as the older adults themselves. So this is the homepage of our website. If you haven't been on you probably have since you signed up for this. But anyway, we like to show this anyway. And so this is the homepage, and there have been a lot of changes made to our whole website over the last couple of years. And we continue to refine it and make new changes depending on need. Now I'm going to introduce Shauna, and I'll stop sharing and put Shauna on the screen. So she is the program coordinator for community outreach and education with North Range Behavioral Health, and has spent the last 10 years working in different aspects of the field from crisis support, residential settings, and now education and training. She's an avid advocate for behavioral health and suicide prevention. And by the way, and I'm sure Shauna will talk about this, but suicides among older adults are increasing and not decreasing for a lot of different reasons. And she is committed to shifting perceptions around mental health in our communities, raising awareness around behavioral health, and helping Weld County residents connect to support. She's a certified mental health first aid instructor, psychological first aid instructor, QPR instructor, and she'll talk about what that means, and holds a bachelor's degree in psychology from UNC. So, Shauna, I'm going to turn this over to you. And do you have slides or do you just want to talk?
I do have slides.
Okay, well, you may begin that process whenever you wish.
Yeah, I will. Sending you a request to share now, Bob.
Okay, you got it.
Well, that was a great introduction. So thank you very much, Bob. And just to kind of elaborate on some of the certifications, mental health first aid, the QPR, these are designed to kind of help normalize the topic of behavioral health and help us all give tools to recognize those signs in the folks in our circle, but maybe also in ourselves. QPR in particular is a suicide education and prevention training. It's about a 90-minute training that comes with a certification that holds the same weight as a CPR certification, hence that shorter acronym as well. And Bob, you were correct. We are seeing a rise in suicide among um, our older adults. So it is an important topic. Today, the focus is going to really be on mental well-being during the holidays. I know that, like for myself, mental health is everyone's favorite topic. Um, I know it's sometimes these can be hard conversations, but today I really hope to give you some tangible tools and just kind of normalize the life experience in general. So As we begin, I love this quote at the bottom of the slide. It says, empathy is a finite resource you can run out. As a normal psychological response, you cannot give of yourself again and again without replenishing. And so some of the tools today I'll talk about is kind of helping to make sure our cups stay full, especially during this time of year. The truth is, we all have good and bad days, and sometimes it's just a bit harder to bounce back from those bad days. Before I really dive into our material, I just kind of like to do some level setting. And it's really important to me that I share with you the strong connection between our mental health and our physical well-being. Really, for a long time, mental health and well-being was really thought of outside of the physical health realm. And I am so grateful today that we are starting to see a shift in that with our physical health providers, among nurses, among our primary care providers. As Bob and I were chatting, it's like when we get a cold, we really have no problem reaching out to our PCP and getting support in that. And my goal in my presentations is just to help normalize that for folks because we all have mental health, just like we all have physical health. And sometimes we're doing awesome. And just like a gas gauge on a car, sometimes we start to see ourselves go towards that empty gauge. And while we're comfortable maybe reaching out to our physical health providers, we should be comfortable reaching out and getting support with our mental health. And there's not one right way to do that. And often, when we are struggling with our mental health, we're going to first notice that through physical health symptoms. Maybe that's more frequent headaches without a pinpoint cause. Maybe that's aches and pains that are out of the ordinary. This can also manifest as GI symptoms or stomach problems. It can even lead to more frequent colds. And I think stress, which does kind of fall under that mental health realm, is a big indicator for some of those physical health symptoms. But with that being said, I just kind of like to transition into what can make these times so tough. And don't get me wrong, certainly the holidays can be very charming and cheery, but the truth is a lot of times this time of year also is just a really difficult time. I'm going to pop up some things here on the screen that we see most common in the behavioral health field that impact the holiday season. So first and foremost, grief and loss. The truth is, most of us have been impacted in some way by grief and loss. And during the holiday season, even if we felt we had a good manage on that, the holiday season itself can kind of make that a lot louder than it was before. Another common one is that loneliness and social isolation piece. I know that Cody with AXA Connection kind of talked about this. I think it was around the 4th of December, and the very real impact of loneliness and social isolation also on our physical health. Another thing that makes this time of year very, very difficult are finances. Truth is, at least in my circle, and in the Weld County community, which is where I reside, most of us are struggling. But during this time of year, I think there's an extra pressure. Maybe that's to provide gifts or to provide meals. Maybe we like to bake during the season and those things just become harder financially. Family dynamics also make the holiday season a bit tough. when we think about holidays, sometimes it's this ever-present idea that we will gather and be able to spend time with our loved ones, but whether it's grief or loss or some isolation, just family dynamics in and of itself can make that very complicated. Seasonal affective disorder. During this time of year, we certainly see a lot of folks' mental health being impacted. There's many reasons for that, and I won't go too deep down the seasonal affective disorder path. We refer to that shortly as SAD. Um, but a lot of times we're moving our body less. We're getting outside a lot less because it's chilly. If it's snowy or icy, it can be dangerous for us to get out there and try and move the way we typically do. And this also leads to lower levels of vitamin D, which have a direct impact on our mental well-being. So just another good example of that interconnection between our physical and our mental well-being. And then this last one, stress, which I really feel like could be an umbrella term for all of these because each one of these points brings on a stress of its own. But this list is certainly not exhaustive. So I'd just like to give a few moments if anybody wants to drop into the chat what else might make this time of year difficult for them. Don't all drop in the chat at once, please.
Well, even if you don't want to type into the chat, we have a limited number of people. So if you want to say something, you can do that too. Just take yourself off mute. Um,
Thank you, Bob.
well, okay, I guess not.
I do see some grief of loved ones passing. Yes. In our circle, we just learned of a passing, and as if that's not difficult, you think about the time of year and then making associations to this time of year as it comes around again, and then kind of being re-traumatized by that loss is very real. Thank you. I see family dysfunction. Absolutely. All right.
I think you can correct me if I'm wrong here, Shauna, but we've probably seen too many movies where everybody's having a wonderful time and they're all together. And so we kind of create this image in our minds that that's how it's supposed to be. But, when the reality of it is, it's hardly ever that way. So, uh,
Spot on. You're
okay.
spot on. And we kind of get bombarded by those images during this time of year. So there's that underlying pressure, even if we're not cognizant of it, that, well, my family can't gather like that, or it's not healthy for my family to gather like that. Less light, you are spot on. And that is a number one contributor to seasonal affective disorder and vitamin D levels. I also see grief for changes in the family or friends, people moving away, and loved ones declining. Absolutely. And if we had maybe traditions that existed before and those have to suddenly shift now because of those reasons, that's very difficult. There's just another comment about it's so true about movies that can make us have even more stress and depression, right? Thank you all for
Maybe we should all watch the National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation to see talk about dysfunctional. So,
yeah, that's a good one. Uh, my family and I actually watched the first Home Alone again, not that I haven't seen it a ton of times, and just kind of those beginning pieces of the movie where there seems to be a lot of dysfunction. I was like, that's the part of the movie I can remember or relate to in terms of my family.
mm.
All right. Well, I'll carry us through a little more. Truthfully, whatever you're feeling, it's especially during this time of year, it's not black and white. There can be numerous emotions and experiences that are present and true at the same time, even if they feel conflicting, right? We don't have to force ourselves to be happy if we're going through it. The goal really is to aim towards compassion with ourselves and committing to practices that kind of prioritize our well-being. And I would bet that most of us have a much easier time extending compassion and grace towards others, but extending that compassion towards ourselves can feel very foreign. It's not even something we're taught how to do. So I just kind of want to point out some of these contradicting things, right? You can feel stress during this time, but then still have an underlying feeling of excitement for the holidays. We can love our family and still not be excited to spend time with them around the holidays, kind of speaking to that dysfunction piece. We can want to give presents while also worrying about our bank account. Like I said, I think most folks are struggling in that realm right now. And if it helps to know, you are not alone. And I think that also goes back to we know that intuitively, but when we talk about movies and medias, those are still the things they're promoting. These gifts or these things that we should be giving or could be giving, and that's just not a reality for a lot of us. Um, you can find ways to establish new traditions while honoring past ones. And that reminds me of the comment we had in here about changes in those families or maybe loved ones declining or moving away. And finally, you can find joy in memories of holidays past and feel pain or sorrow at the same time. And that's tricky for us when, like I said, these things aren't black and white, and two opposite emotions can be very present at the same time. I am going to transition into some of the skills we can use during this time to kind of help build some resiliency during the holidays and make it feel a bit more manageable. But first, I want to talk about the very real impact of stress on the brain, kind of tying in again that physical and emotional well-being connection. This slide um, I'm a visual learner, so I'm actually going to stop sharing in a moment and kind of talk about what this slide means, but just briefly, I'll touch on these steps 1 through 5. So information enters our brain stem and it tries to match with a memory. Our amygdala determines a threat and releases cortisol. And if these words don't make sense yet, don't worry. Um, that stress hormone, the cortisol, kind of blasts through our brain, and our cortex is kind of tasked with shutting it down, but oftentimes it's unable to, and that amygdala takes over. And then we find ourselves in kind of a constant state of a stress response. And that just means those fight, flight, and freeze experiences. And these aren't always conscious. We're not like, oh, yep, my amygdala's taking over. I'm now stressed. But ultimately, kind of once you get to that step 5, this is where we can see things like maybe we're feeling more irritable or aggressive, and that's not our nature. Maybe we start increasing our substance use or even any kind of mood altering substances. Maybe we start to isolate or shut down. Um, Very common when we're in these states. And I'm going to stop sharing briefly. We like to use what we call the hand model of the brain to kind of help us understand that diagram I was just showing. So I'm going to show you that now.
Okay.
So in this model,
Oh, hold on.
My wrist represents my brain stem. My fingers right here are my frontal lobe, and then we're looking at prefrontal and cortex here. This part of our brain, sometimes we call it our wizard brain because it's in charge of logic, reason, it's an emotion control center, and it's also a memory center. When I lift my fingers up, this is where we see the amygdala. You won't be tested on that term, but I like to call the amygdala our lizard brain. It is a more primitive part of our brain, and its only function and concern is your safety. And this is where we see fight, flight, and freeze responses. And so often when we are under more stress, or jumping from one stressful season to another season, um, from summer to fall, from fall to our holidays, we say that a lot of times we flip our lid. And what I mean by that is this lizard brain becomes hyperactive. And as you see in this example, logic, reason, emotion control, those things kind of go offline. And this lizard brain is now pumping our body with extra amounts of cortisol, the stress hormone. And I don't want to confuse that. Cortisol can be used to help us get through tough times, but it starts releasing it in disproportionate measures, in ways that we don't necessarily need to work through a problem. It also starts to push out adrenaline and noradrenaline. And so trying to logic or reason our way out of it isn't going to work because those things are kind of offline. So I'm going to share my screen again. And to kind of help move us through this stress response, the truth is, because there's such a very real biological response at this time, we have to do things that are going to remind our brain and our body that it's okay, and to kind of tell this amygdala, hey, buddy, calm down. And we kind of want to come back into that frontal lobe, prefrontal cortex, where we can start managing in a healthier way again. With that being said, I kind of want to transition into what are some of our tools to do this. And truthfully, managing our expectations throughout the holiday season is one of the most helpful things we can do to support our mental wellness. Really understanding the things that we can and cannot control can help us manage those negative holiday emotions. And again, most of us know this intuitively, but if we're in a state where that part of our brain is kind of offline, it kind of helps to refocus. So I'm going to explain this diagram a little bit. You see this outermost circle, that's our circle of concern. Those are those things that we really don't have control over, whether that's the weather, other folks' health status, climate change, war, politics, violence. Those live in that outer circle, not really within our control. Moving in one circle, we're looking at our circle of influence. Those are work relationships, family relationships, behaviors of other people. And then finally, in the center here, those are the things we can control, our circle of control. Maybe that's our personal goals. Maybe that's what self-care practices we're choosing to employ, our priorities, the boundaries we set. We're going to talk about those in a moment, your own thoughts and how we respond to others. Is there anything else? And I just want to say during this time, most of us tend to focus on this outermost circle. When stress gets difficult, our brain kind of focuses on this very outer circle. But really where we find optimal well-being is in this inner circle, those things that are within our control. But kind of looking at what's on the screen, does anybody have anything else they'd like to add that is maybe within their circle of control? Well, I don't see that anybody put weather within their control, so I think we're doing good so far. If that's something you would put in your circle of control, I would love to connect with you after the webinar. All right. One way that we can kind of retrain our brains into focusing in on that innermost circle is by setting healthy boundaries. Much easier said than done, I know. But the truth is, when talking about boundaries, a lot of us think of them from the perspective of the other person, right? So we think of boundaries as telling others what they can or cannot do. And that's really not what a boundary is. Instead, boundaries are about telling ourselves what our limitations are and then being able to communicate that with others. And just shifting that perspective can make it much easier for us to be willing to have those conversations. So, for instance, um, holidays with some family members can cause stress. I know in our family, some folks are struggling with substance use, and that increases during the holiday season, and that creates stress for our family to be around that behavior. Now, the truth is, I can't control whether my cousin Susie is going to engage in utilizing substances at a family event. But what I can do for myself and my family is by communicating ahead of time and saying, you know what, we are so happy to attend the family gathering, but just so you know, if cousin Susie starts to drink too much, we're probably gonna leave. Um, and we can say that in a kind way and with love. And sharing our boundaries up front is one way to do this. Maybe you're already entrenched in the struggles with a family member who is either struggling with substance use or their own mental health, and that starts to take a toll on our well-being. Um, we can communicate a boundary by saying, you know, I'm here for you. I just can't be there for you in a way that's not healthy for either of us. So when you're ready for help, I am happy to be in your corner. Those win statements in general really create a nice balance between setting our healthy boundary, but leaving that door open for a future relationship, maybe when these folks are ready to try a different path. Um, this kind of allows us to keep that connection intact while at the same time take care of ourselves. This boundary lets them know that they matter and that the door is still open. Not that folks are always going to recognize that in the moment, but we can walk away from that interaction, at least in my case, being, hey, I didn't explode. I didn't say something that I was later going to regret. And I did leave with a message of, I'm here when you're ready. Any questions about that? All right, I'll keep going. If you do have questions, I'll keep trying to monitor the chat. Um, Another skill I kind of want to talk about is coping with the emotions piece of this wheel in general. And so on the slide here, you can see that we can use a journal to identify what we're experiencing, right? Name that emotion. It's important to pause and breathe and calm ourselves if we do plan to journal. And really naming those core emotions you're feeling in the moment. This one's really big is listening to what our emotions are telling us without that judgment piece. I think a lot of us can relate to, we may feel the emotion and then be frustrated with ourselves, like, why do you feel this way? Or you shouldn't feel this way because, and then we can think through that and move forward. Now, I just want to be upfront. Journaling is not everyone's gig. That's not their go-to, and that's quite all right. And that's why I kind of have on the screen here, don't should on yourself. I'm going to go through many other things that we can do. But what's nice about journaling is if the thought has crossed your mind at some point, even if you're not actively thinking about it, it kind of lives up there in our brain, which means that it's changing what chemicals we're dumping throughout the day. Journaling can be a good way of getting it out of our brain and maybe stopping that cortisol dump. This is something you can do daily, you can do it weekly, you can do it just when you're feeling really frustrated. And like I said, if you're not actively thinking the thought, but it's crossed your mind, it's living in there somewhere. Um, and again, don't should on yourself. I said in the beginning, there's not one way to approach our mental well-being. So I do want to share, um, and this ties directly to that hand model of the brain that I went over earlier. But on the screen, you're going to see 6 things in particular that kind of help us get through that stress cycle and kind of help bring that frontal lobe back online. And it also can slow that cortisol dump, but it's also going to replace it with some dopamine or serotonin, which is our feel-good chemicals. So I'm going to talk about these a little bit more in depth. First one is exercise and movement. Um, I don't necessarily like the word exercise in this because this just is really any kind of body movement you can do. The quickest way to kind of calm down an overactive amygdala or stress hormone dumping is through moving our body. Kind of helps those things get through our kidney, through our liver, so it's not staying stuck in our body. And as I mentioned before, those aches and pains, maybe we can wake up less mornings with that prick in our neck. This doesn't have to be intensive. And one of the movement pieces I appreciate the most is walking. The reason I love walking so much in terms of mental health is when we walk, our eyes tend to move in a lateral fashion, which means they kind of move back and forth as we walk. That back and forth or lateral eye movement really addresses that lizard brain and it slows that lizard brain down. So if you're ever someone who's gone on a walk and you're like, man, I feel really good, a lot of times it's because we're calming down some of those overactive parts of our brain that are dumping stress chemicals. I get it. This time of year is chilly. It can be icy and snowy. I tend to be a pacer. If you have the space, even in your room, um, don't pace in a circle because if you're like me, you might get a little dizzy. But even walking somewhere in your home, or I have family members who are on full-time oxygen, so they can't be out in that cold weather. And so we will utilize a store. We'll go to the store and kind of just walk through the aisles. Again, when we walk, that lateral eye movement calms down that lizard brain and can really slow down the stress chemical production. Breathing is a great thing. We all do this, right? But we tend to breathe in a fashion that actually excites our nervous system. There are tons of breathing exercises that you can do. I'll be honest, during times of intense stress, breathing exercises can take 2 to 5 minutes to work. And I prefer to practice breathing exercises with someone around me. But a good rule of thumb for a breathing exercise is try to exhale twice as long as your inhale. Doesn't matter how long that is. If you do a 1 second inhale, try and do a 2 to 3 second exhale. The reason for that is the exhale in our body is directly related to our parasympathetic nervous system, or that rest and digest nervous system. Again, calming down those stress chemicals that we may be pumping. Affection and positive social interactions, these can go hand in hand. Even if you're someone who considers yourself more of an introvert, having some type of positive social interaction really is imperative. We are relational creatures by nature, and we survive better together when we can spend time with folks we trust. Even if this is an animal, we will start to release dopamine and serotonin, again, those feel-good chemicals. Touching more on affection, I don't know if any of you knew, maybe so, that a 20-second hug can actually lower your blood pressure. This works under the idea of co-regulation, which is simply when one nervous system calms down another nervous system. Good visual for this, I like to think of new mothers with an infant, and they're holding them on their chest. A lot of times their heart rate is going to sync up. So if you're not a hugger, I don't encourage you to just randomly start hugging folks. But if you are someone who enjoys a hug or affection, maybe do that more during this time of year. Creative expression. This is again tied to feel-good hormones that our brain is going to produce. And this can be done in many ways. Maybe you like to sing, maybe you like to draw or paint, kind of getting back to those hobby things. Creative expression can even be listening to a song that you enjoy. Again, we're going to start to release feel-good hormones. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of a good cry, but they call it that for a reason. When we are able to cry, we are actually processing cortisol and a lot of those stress hormones in our body. Another thing, if you're an ugly crier, like I term myself, if you really get going, you may notice your breathing pattern changes. You'll kind of do an and that is your body on its own really trying to kick in that parasympathetic nervous system to help calm your body down. Stick with me here. This next set of tools I'm going to share might sound a little counterintuitive, but another great way to really fight fatigue and stress during the holiday season is with compassion. And I just want to touch on what these things are. So reconnecting with your rewards. At one point, hopefully all of us had some hobbies, but a lot of times, and especially during holiday season, we kind of let those things fall off. We also let those things fall off during the colder months. So if you can take 5 to 10 minutes a day or a few times a week to get back to those hobbies that you enjoy, really going to help build resiliency during the holiday season. Raising your gratitude quotient, that's a fancy way of just saying, do something nice for someone because you can and because you want to. And this can be anything. I don't know if folks in here are maybe connected to their neighbors. That's, I think, a lot less common today than it used to be, but even leaving a note on their door saying, I hope you have a good day today. Um, for me, traffic in my area has increased tenfold, and I can tend to be a bit more stressed on the road. So one way I will raise my gratitude quotient is let that person merge if they need to get in. And this kind of goes hand in hand with being in service to others. I said earlier, a lot of us are probably really good at extending compassion to others, but it's hard to do that for ourselves. So if we can um, try to do nice things for others, not because we're asked to, that can really help, again, switch those brain chemicals, again, building resiliency. Three good things. This is something I really encourage my family to practice, and just daily or weekly or on some type of pattern structured way, listing three good things you've either witnessed, three good attributes you have, or things that you're thankful for, and actually post those somewhere where you can see them. This is also going to make it a lot easier for you to have compassion towards yourselves. Um, Compassion renewal, so witnessing compassion. We talked about how the media oftentimes can present the holidays in a way that we really can't relate to. I really encourage you, if you're somebody who engages in TV or media, to look for those things that are truly uplifting and warm. I tend to be someone who I like crime shows. And during this season, I will intentionally avoid those because even if I feel like I'm enjoying watching it, this goes for the news too, right? We, even if I want to stay informed, this season is tougher for me. And so I'm going to avoid consuming those things because whether you're consciously aware of it or not, it has a real impact on our stress levels and specifically those chemicals that we're dumping during this time of year. Um, Savoring experiences. I can't count how many times that I've eaten a meal and someone around me has said, "Did you even taste it?" You ate it so quick. So really slowing down to savor the experiences around you, whether that's a good meal, whether that's opening the blinds and letting the sun. We're so lucky in the state of Colorado to have as much sunshine as we do. Let that sun hit your face and really relish in that moment. And then self-care. I am going to talk a little bit more about this, so I'm going to move on to that now. The one thing I tell everyone, and self-care is a broad term, means a lot of different things to different people, but it doesn't have to be lavish. Self-care is anything we can do intentionally to help improve our mood, make us feel a little more competent. And I really say self-care should not be stress care, meaning we shouldn't employ self-care after things are already overwhelming. And going back to that physical and mental connection, I'd like to liken self-care to vitamins, right? So we had in the chat too, less light during this time of year absolutely impacts us. So maybe we're taking a vitamin D supplement. You're not going to take the vitamin D supplement on day one and be like, oh, awesome. I feel my levels rising. I'm doing better. And so self-care is works in a very similar way. It should be something that we practice in small doses, whether that's daily or a few times a week. And over time, then we do start to feel that cloud lift, so to speak. Um, I think some folks relate self-care to like vacations, or a lot of us also have like a negative feeling like, self-care feels kind of self-centered. I don't know how to do this. This could be spending 5 minutes a day, again, opening the blinds and letting the sun hit your face, but remembering to do this in a structured fashion, similar to vitamins. In a few weeks of practicing this on a regular basis, that's when we start to reap the benefits of it. Another tip is staying connected. And this one is probably one that I personally struggle with the most because when I feel my stress levels are higher, I feel like I'm going to kind of avoid this interaction, this person, this event, this lunch, because I'm not feeling so hot and I don't want to bring the group around me down. Um, and that's simply a fallacy, but I think a lot of us can relate to feeling like a burden at times. But kind of going back to, I've said throughout our time, it's really easy for us to be compassionate towards others. And so when we place ourselves in those positions where we're connecting, even if we're not feeling so hot, maybe we're helping that other person work on their self-care because the truth is, folks really do want to help. Um, Again, I said there, I think December 4th, Cody with Acts of Connection did a whole kind of series on loneliness and isolation. And just kind of commenting on the slide here, there really is a difference between alone time, which a lot of us need to kind of recoup, and then that self-isolation piece where I kind of find myself falling to, where I'm like, I'm already stressed. I don't want to change the mood for the folks around me. But there's many ways that we can stay connected during this time. And I'd like to open it up again if anybody wants to drop in the chat ways that they already stay connected or think they'd like to try and stay connected during this season. One thing I think of right off the bat is attending today's webinar. Um, Hopefully that's a relatively simple thing for us to do, especially if you're someone who can't travel far or weather prevents that. Where many of us do get fatigued by technology, it can also help us feel a bit more connected during this time of year. So I really encourage folks to connect with your circle, whether that's through a letter, joining a webinar, calling a loved one. I really encourage you to do that. I see this comment. Thank you, Bob. Some of our stress is often caused by trying to be someone we are not, like what we see in the movie or read in a story. I love this quote: be yourself, everyone else is taken. That's beautiful. Well, I'm going to steal that. I'll give you credit when I do. Um, I love that. Be yourself. Everyone else is taken. It kind of goes hand in hand with that burden piece. Go ahead, Bob.
Hello.
Hi, I'm going. I can handle the clothes. Okay.
Sorry, Bob. I saw you on mute, so I wanted to give you an opportunity to share, but I didn't hear. So feel free to interrupt me as I go. All right. One kind of final thing I'd like to share with folks is this holiday self-care checklist. I'm just going to kind of read these off. If you're like me, if I don't write it down or if I don't have a visual, it's likely not going to happen. No different than my groceries. If I forget my list, I'm going to be wandering the aisles for a long time. So reading this list, I will focus on things that are within my control. I will set and honor healthy boundaries. I will invest in relationships. I will take care of my physical health, whether that's through exercise, sleep, sunlight, and even treating illness as they arise. I will find ways to help finish the stress cycle. Those were those 6 items we went through before. I will avoid mood altering substances. I will commit to doing something every day that makes me feel competent, confident, or keeps me learning. This can even be done in like 5-minute seconds. Think of this as your daily mental health supplement, similar to your vitamin D. And is there anything else that anybody would add to this checklist that would be important for maintaining your well-being during this time of year? We can do all the things and we're still not doing so hot. Or maybe we recommend these things to folks in our circle, and we still need a little more support. Whatever the stressor is, the holidays really can feel so heavy for so many. And I just encourage you all to reach out if you need that extra support. As we said in the beginning, if we have a cold, if we have a flu, there's really not a lot of shame when it comes to reaching out to our PCP. And I really encourage you to think about your mental health in a similar way. As Bob mentioned, I serve specifically Weld County, Colorado. And so we have information on here. We also provide a walk-in crisis center. And I just want to say crisis is as we define it. There really is no issue too big or too small. That is literally why these people do this. They want to support folks who are having a hard time. In Weld County, we do have crisis services available in person, over the phone, 24/7, 365. We don't close for holidays. There's a phone number there too, but I recognize a lot of folks are not in Weld County. I don't know if you have heard of 988. It is the new National Crisis and Suicide Hotline, meant to be similar to 911, quick and easy to remember. And if you go to 988colorado.com, you can actually find a list of, I think we have 10 crisis centers throughout Colorado. And through their website, you will be able to find those. A good thing to note, if it's for yourself or for a loved one, if you program the number in your phone, even the number as simple as 988, if we program it in our phone, we're 60% more likely to use it if we need it. If we've tried to call that number before and we kind of know what it sounds like on the other end, we're 80 to 85% more likely to call it when we need it. So whether this is for yourself or for a loved one, even practicing I call 988 all the time when I'm providing trainings and just say, we're testing the line. While the number is similar to 911, this does not connect you to law enforcement in any way. Just meant to be quick and easy. But with that being said, I don't think I've left too much time for questions, but certainly have a slide for that. And if you have more questions for myself or any of the content, my email address is also on the slide here.
Okay. Thank you, Shauna. And I would add too that everything you shared with us today applies no matter where you live, really, right? Yeah. Uh, anywhere in the country, actually. Um, okay. Well, very nicely done. Great information. Really appreciate it. And thanks to all of you who joined today. I hope that this is going to prove helpful to you and or your families. And we want to wish you all the happiest of holidays. And remember to be yourself because everyone else is taken. So, okay. That was Oscar Wilde, by the way. Um,
Ah,
yeah.
yeah. I will give
Okay.
Oscar Wilde and you credit, Bob.
No, no,
Thank you everyone for having me too.
okay. All right. Have a great afternoon, everyone. Take care. All right. Bye bye.
Okay.